Hello, my Pop 5 listeners. We are here with the gang, again with another special couple of episodes coming to you. We decided it wouldn't be a pop culture podcast without spending the time to review our top 5 pieces of film and TV, as well as our top 5 musical pieces for the year, and having our My Pop 5 picks of what we loved throughout 2021. I'm really excited about, a lot of the art and content that came out despite the pandemic, and there was a lot of really great things that we've had the chance to touch on throughout the course of this year, but also in general that's come out since we've been on our hiatus, and just wanted to take the time to chat. So we are here with a bit of the gang. We have Daniel. Say hey, Daniel.
Hey, Daniel.
And Briauna. How are you?
Hey, Daniel.
Oh,
that was a little dad joke. We'll have to cut that out.
That's all good. So, we are going to take our turns here just in a minute. Today, we're going to be spending our time talking about TV and film, just some housekeeping. Next week, we will have one last episode before Christmas here for you, where we talk about all our favorite things, music. This episode's going to be a little bit different here today because we do have Ronnie joining. She'll be doing it a little bit separately. So we're going to be mixing in our conversation both with Ronnie and with Briauna so we can get a little bit of everyone's opinions on these things. So let's go ahead and go around the room and talk about what were our top 5 pieces of TV or film from the year. For the audience, all our criteria is it could be a season of TV, it could be an episode of television, it could be a full movie, and what was our top 5. So let's start with Daniel. Daniel, what were your top 5 pieces of TV and film from the year 2021?
In no particular order, I have Halloween Kills, Luca, the Pixar movie, Castlevania Season 4, Bo Burnham's Inside, and Resident Evil, Welcome to Raccoon City.
Awesome. Briauna?
I have Maid, Black Widow, King Richard, The White Lotus, and Squid Games.
White Lotus, which is what we came in on with that nice little jingle. Mine happened to be Season 2 of Ted Lasso, which came out this year. Season 3 of Succession, which is currently airing, will likely be over by the time this airs. But Succession, which is still currently airing at the time we were recording this. Love Life Season 2. Mayor of Easttown, which we've talked about in detail here on the show. And Sex Education Season 3. So what I found interesting, guys, was that amongst our stuff here, we actually didn't have any sort of overlap. Where I did have a bit of a tug of war of one of the things I wanted to put on, and I will say I had you in mind, Daniel, is with Inside Bo Burnham. One, I didn't think about putting it on because I was like, hopefully Daniel will, because I know he would. But then also, we've already done a pretty extensive commentary on that episode. So we'll limit our time on that specific piece. But I just wanted to kind of talk about, in hindsight, that's something I know we all experience and spend some time talking about. What still sits with you? I know it was very fresh when we listened to it the first time. Has it been something that you've gone back to, Daniel? And kind of why does that still resonate with you as to where we are now 6 months later?
See, what actually made me realize how much it stuck with me was Spotify Wrapped coming out earlier this year. And That Funny Feeling was in like my top 5 songs. And I was like, wait a second, that song, I listened to that all year and then renewed my love for it when Phoebe did her cover. So then I was like, yeah, that was a huge song for me this year. I watched it a couple times after we spoke about it. There was a point this year where I was like obsessed with it, and I just like could not get enough of the songs and the concept. That in particular, just taking away that one song and the visuals. Yeah, that song is like one of my favorite songs probably ever.
Yeah, just for the audience, we had a chance. I know we teased it on social media once when we first got the tickets, but as you all know, we are all huge Phoebe Bridgers fans. And when she came into LA back in October, we had a chance to have a group outing and go see the concert together. So me, Briauna, and Daniel were out there really loving it. And for her encore, she played That Funny Feeling. Daniel happened to be at the merch booth at the time, and I was just thinking, oh gosh, where's Daniel? This is his moment, his crossover of Phoebe and That Funny Feeling.
I ran back, don't worry.
That was full circle for us, you guys.
It was a moment.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of things that I found interesting throughout our list, specifically as it pertains to the music episode, which we will get to next week, specifically as how much there have been specific artists that have carried an influence throughout a lot of what we like. Daniel and I have actually had a conversation about this before, in that as we've been interviewing new guests for season 2, which we were really excited about, what I found is that a lot of the influences of the people we've been interviewing, there's a lot of crossover. And what I found interesting is there have been people that have either been aware of that are within their influences, but then also people who I don't know who they are, but they've shown up in multiple people's pop fives or, adjacent to those pop fives, and ultimately became things that I have since enjoyed. And so what I found interesting was that the people that you end up ultimately bringing into your circle, and that the people that you ultimately find interesting, likely have things that inspire them that you also like. And there's like a through line and various connection points where the world cannot seem so small, or at least the world of your interest cannot seem so small. And when we talk about Phoebe Bridgers, there is that through line back to this Bo Burnham thing, because we saw her singing this song, but then multiple aspects where Phoebe Bridgers has shown up in a lot of the various music careers of the people that we're going to be talking about next week, or, how Bo Burnham can then translate into some of the things that we've talked about here on the show and the various things that we're interested in from a comedy perspective or a film perspective. And it's just interesting how that's come to be. Briauna, how about for you? I know you liked Inside. We loved and talked about that. Has anything stuck with you about that specific piece of work that still resonates with you? And how do you feel about it 6 months removed?
I guess I feel removed from it, but not that. No, it's been a big year. I feel like I've consumed a lot and I haven't thought about it since, but all I can hear in my head is Phoebe singing That Funny Feeling.
Me too. So why don't we actually take a break and listen to a little bit of That Funny Feeling, Phoebe Bridgers version.
Stunning 8K resolution meditation app in honor of the revolution. It's half off at the Gap. Deadpool self-awareness, loving parents, harmless fun. The backlash to the backlash to the thing that's just begun. There it is again, that funny feeling, that funny feeling. There it is again, that funny feeling.
Such a beautiful tune. Briauna, let's talk about one of the ones on yours that I also had at least some awareness with. Actually, was one of my favorite movies of the year. My list was loaded with seasons of television, and I think just because so many of the things that they're doing in TV is just truly incredible, it was hard for me to bump any of these off in lieu of this movie. But as a Marvel fan of sorts, I'm not the biggest Marvel fan, but I have seen all of them, right? That sounds like funny, but I think we know there's a spectrum of people who have
Wait, you saw the
seen...
Eternals, right?
I did see Eternals,
yeah. I got to still.
Yeah. So like with all the Marvel films, there are people who watch them and enjoy them, and then there's the mega fans who know everything about everything that there is to know about it. But Black Widow happened to be one of my favorite Marvel movies in a long time, and probably one of my favorite ones they've ever done, with so many great performances in that. And so tell me why you love Black Widow. We say this and are snickering because Daniel happens to be the Marvel mega fan I was alluding to, as he just pulls out a Doctor Strange comic book as we're talking. But
Hand it over. I need to take notes.
Talk to me about Black Widow and what you loved about it.
It's funny you say that, though, because I feel like the emotional context of Black Widow is probably why anybody could enjoy it, which I appreciate. And also what kind of made it stand out for me. It did take me by surprise, because I'll admit, like, Natasha Romanoff isn't like, I haven't been super drawn to her. And like, so getting this backstory, I saw it twice. I guess like, I don't know. I loved it. And there's Florence Pugh in it. I love the daddy issues. I love, I think it was a great storytelling. I feel like people discredit Marvel if you want to say like film, if you want to talk about cinema. I feel like people discredit Marvel, but then there's so much heart to the stories, and Black Widow made it just a little bit more accessible, that anybody could see that there's more depth to it. So yeah, it really stuck with me.
I think Marvel is getting better at just making good movies. Probably out of necessity, where they're like, oh no, we plan to keep, we're going to make all of these interconnected movies, and that's our game plan for the next 10 years. So I think, out of necessity, they have, and probably now have the freedom to realize, like, people are going to watch our movies. We can do things that are different. We can make any kind of movie now. And, because you have just being able to explore the backstories of all these characters who have never been big, they're not Spider-Man, they're not Iron Man.
Yeah, they totally like recreated. I guess there's like, it's almost like Hallmark movies where there's like non-negotiables. Like it's going to be Christmas. There's going to be like a loss of a parent. It's white or whatever. I feel like Marvel, now that they do have so much prominence in our lives, they can be flexible on those like non-negotiables of like big action scenes and big money. And Black Widow was a great example of that, of telling like a different story. And it totally took me off guard. I think too, I didn't know what to expect. And David Harbour too, that was super cool
Love
to
him.
see. Yeah, I missed him.
Yeah, from Stranger Things, is that
Yeah.
why? But I agree. I think the superhero movie has evolved so much in that what it was originally is you can get away with someone who is just bold and powerful and has a clever, witty line, but there's no depth behind the character much more than that, right? At least as it pertains to TV and film, right? When you look at like the early Superman movies, it was just like he's a hero and the hero archetype, and that's that, As we've evolved and as things have gone on, and even some of those earlier Avengers movies, the witty line from the original Iron Man and, the types of evolution that you see from what his character was at the start of this to where it ended in the ways things went in the more recent movies, it's clear that they are trying to touch more of the human elements and who are these people behind the mask, right? And allowing you in there, because I think people crave that. People crave the relatability behind these, giant godlike figures in some instances. And Black Widow is kind of the exception in that, sure, she's a super soldier of sorts, for having been brainwashed by, Russia in her upbringing, but she's still just a normal human and it doesn't have any sort of extraordinary superpowers. And that entire movie was really captivating. You mentioned it as well. Florence Pugh, I think she stole the movie for me. She was really phenomenal, and just how funny she was, like her emotion. And like, I think of, and spoilers, turn it off or skip ahead if you don't want to hear this portion.
Or watch it.
Yeah, or go watch it. Yeah. But, there's a specific scene, and it's not too spoiler heavy, but when she's sitting at the table talking about the family, and they're talking about how the family is not a real family for various different reasons laid out in the film. But that's when she breaks down and she says, no, it was real to me. You guys were my family. And I think her performance, just from a pure emotion perspective, the sibling relationship that you get and the banter, both earnest and, played up to being argumentative siblings, she was just, I think, the best. And I just was like, I wanted more of that banter and that relationship, because I grew up with siblings and I had that same type of, not love-hate, but love-annoy type of relationship. It was just really special to view that. And those performances, I think, were really what took it away from me from a very ground level, giant mega movie, if those two things can coexist.
That wasn't real.
What?
That wasn't real. Who cares?
Don't say that. Please don't say that. It was real. It was real to me. You are my mother. You were my real mother. The closest thing I ever had to one. The best part of my life was fake. And none of you told me.
Yeah, it snuck in there. As far as Florence goes, I feel like her character, she was so vulnerable in that she really cared about these people and she missed them, and there was no like ego there. So I think that's really helpful to see. And then also it's interesting, like you mentioned how they're starting to give like this human relatability in these big ways, but how cool like that you can escape through these characters. I guess, of course, Natasha doesn't have these superpowers, but in Marvel movies, you can escape, but then you also feel connected to it. And that probably is really, really helpful for a lot of people.
It's interesting that how much these fake stories can be so powerful, right? I think it's interesting as humans that we are interested in these little things that are make-believe, I
I
think
totally
as
agree.
kids, that is what you do. You make believe, right? Whether they're stories that are based in reality or not, that's what we love. We love story, and we're driven by story. And I think it's so interesting that us as creatures are driven by that. And that's all about what we're talking about here today. TV and film is all story and narrative and relationships and arcs and story arcs and archetypes. And it's really cool that that's something that exists.
That's interesting that you say that, because I think something that I've realized in my adult life, I'm like not so big on TVs and movies, and just doing this podcast has like gotten me more so into it and realizing, oh, it's fun to watch movies, it's fun to watch TV shows. And that's exactly my thought too, is like there's something about the human experience, and it's something that's like completely unique to humanity, is like the way that we are so interested in stories and what we can find about ourselves, or they help us through certain things, or they help us make sense of our own lives. Like that's something that I maybe didn't always understand, but I'm slowly coming to, like with just watching more TVs and more movies and like just
Totally.
relaxing, you know?
Yeah. I'm going to volley back and forth, I think, between the two of you in terms of some of the things on your list, just because I'm kind of interested as to how you came about this and kind of why these things were impactful for you. One of the things that came up for me, Daniel, is that you had like a couple of really dark, spooky, or horror-based things. I'm curious, speak on all of them or each of them individually, but tell me a bit about either Halloween Kills or Resident Evil or Castlevania, and kind of what was it about this stuff in the year 2021 that really like stuck out as being some of the top pieces of content for you?
Okay, so I'll preface this by saying, and I'm glad you brought this up, because I wanted to explain, first of all, Resident Evil was not a good movie, but I enjoyed it so much because I am such a big fan of the games. Same with Castlevania, but that was the opposite, where I had heard that it was a good show. But that's the exception here, is that I think Castlevania is really good. And it made me want to try the games because I had never tried them before. And then same with Halloween Kills. I didn't like it as much as I thought it would be, but I had to put them on my list because I was so excited. Specifically for Halloween and Resident Evil, I was like, when Halloween was coming, I was like, all I could think about, I was like, oh my God, like in a week, I'm going to be watching the new Halloween movie. Like, and then when it finally came out, like I was a bit disappointed, and I watched it a couple times and I ended up liking it more the second time. I just think that it wasn't exactly what I expected, but it belonged on the list because it was I was so excited for that. And then both Resident Evil just came out. I watched that, last week. And the same thing with that one. I was like, I would like wake up in the morning and like, oh wait, what's the date? Is Resident Evil out today? Like I was like trying to sneak away from my family on Thanksgiving because I knew that like Resident Evil was
that
playing
the
already,
Thanksgiving
so.
movie this year, Resident Evil?
was.
And like House of Gucci, I guess.
Yeah. And my sister went to see it with me.
How
And
cool.
she had a lot of fun. So I will say that like I recommend it. It's one of those movies where it's just like, it's dumb fun. It's spooky. I like watching horror movies, and that just reminds me of Halloween. So, but I'm glad that you brought that up, because in particular, I don't necessarily think that they're like great movies, but it was great fun and definitely some highlights of my year, and just like things that I remember fondly just speculating about and being like, being on Reddit and like looking at like, oh, what do people think the new movie's going to be about? And actually with one of my music picks, I think one thing that got me so interested in Halloween is that my favorite band, Ghost, did like a tie-in song that also like made me so excited, because I'm like, oh, it's my favorite band. Like,
Yeah.
they made a song for it and it's going to be in it. So even if they weren't the best movies, they were still a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think that goes to that has to be said about all of our stuff. I don't know that I'm trying to say that these are the definitive best things of 2021, but
Right.
they are our picks for what our favorite things were to consume throughout the year. But you mentioned a couple times that some of these things were disappointing, specifically Halloween. What did you find disappointing about it? Was it because of the hype that you built up that you think it was disappointing, or do you think there were elements of the story that you ultimately didn't like?
With Halloween specifically, I think that one was probably like the most disappointing for me because ultimately I just don't think I really liked what they did with the story. Like Halloween,
Yeah.
the reboot that I think it came out in 2018 now, but I feel like that movie was so good and it's probably like my favorite Halloween movie. And so for this one, I was just expecting it to be like more brutal. I thought it was really gonna like surprise me, but I feel like it was so predictable in like the worst way. Like I feel like, and there was a lot of like cheesy stuff where they would be like, you know, they'd have like this one character having this realization. No, it turns out that this is what Michael wanted. It turns out he's turning us into monsters. And it's like, that to me is like not Michael Myers. Like he's not like this calculated, like, I'm trying to show you the evil in you. Like that just wasn't it for me.
They did
like,
get evil though. He did do it.
Right.
I was more mad at, I feel like, the town than Michael at the end of it.
Yeah, right? Because they all like lost their mind. And then during the whole movie, like you have
Kyle
Laurie's,
Richards.
right. Well,
Beverly Hills Housewife.
You have Laurie's granddaughter in university is like this 17-year-old girl who's like, no, I have to go out and like try to fight Michael Myers. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, that's not, no. I don't know. There's just some parts of the story where I was just like, I know it's a horror movie and I know that's the point, is like they're putting themselves in danger, but it just didn't feel like it. The tone of it reminded me of like Star Wars The Last Jedi, where they were just like trying to like subvert the entire Halloween formula. And it could have been really interesting, but it just wasn't.
Okay.
That's a sick comparison.
I'm very obviously very passionate about it because it was like, there were, as far as like me thinking that or hoping that it was going to be like more brutal, it was. There was some like fun, like kind of like so bad it's good, like kill scenes, you know, because that's what everyone watches like slasher movies for. Like there's one part where this girl goes to shoot Michael with a gun and he's like sitting in a car and he like kicks the car door open and she like shoots herself.
Oh yeah.
I was like, oh my God. But it just like made me laugh. So they definitely did go more brutal with it, but I just felt like this story was like a little hokey.
Horror adjacent, we had a HBO series called The White Lotus, which you and Ronnie actually both have on your list here.
Oh, yeah.
But talk to me about that one. And the reason I said it's horror adjacent, this isn't a huge spoiler. The show starts off with a whodunit of sorts. You know that someone dies, and then the entire series you're running, okay, the show starts by showing you a dead body, and you're just waiting to watch this whole cast of characters to find out what is the whole gist of this story. So tell me about your experience with White Lotus and why you loved it.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know, like it kind of caught me off guard. And even hearing like our intro song, I binge watched it. And you'd think I'd be sick of that because they play it incessantly, but I'm not. I love it. And I think with White Lotus, what I loved the most is it was just unique. Like each character I hadn't met before, it wasn't predictable and take on, I feel like I have like a good understanding of like people, and each of those characters kind of took me off guard and in a great way. So plus like I love Jennifer Coolidge. She kind of always like, she maybe wasn't as like unpredictable because I feel like she has like a certain type of character that she plays. But yeah, it was just a unique show and it was refreshing, and you kind of, it's one of those ones I almost think you do need a binge watch.
Yeah, I agree. It's a mini series, I think, with the intention of it being, wrapped in a bow by the end of it. There's potential of it being, much like an anthology of having a different cast of characters in the next season. So it may not be over as a show, but in terms of what White Lotus was today, it is an overarching series. I said horror adjacent because it's not actually horror, but there are aspects of it that are comedy as well. There are aspects
horrific,
of it.
I guess.
Horrific, yeah. There are also just these like characters that are caricatures of who you imagine these archetypes would be. I say this because I'm trying to not spoil a lot of it, but we have these characters that are basically being these white, rich people who would be frequenting these lavish, all expense paid resorts, but archetypes of that. So the characters in the movie are not in on the joke, but a lot of the little nuances let you know as the audience that, okay, these aren't actually real people. It's just kind of like the extreme of what these types of characters and the decisions they make and what they do. And what I really liked, but also was disheartened by in the show, is there are moments where there are other characters that have more humanity in them and have more life stories and people that you root for in the show. But at the end, it's the characters that shouldn't win that always win. And it's such a bummer because you hope for better for a lot of these different things. But the show does a good job of, depending on how you view the world, saying that, hey, sometimes the man is always going to be the man at the end. You know what I mean? Like they're always going to be the one that wins. And it sucked for me at the end because I'm just like, I wanted the end to be a little bit different.
Yeah, it's interesting too because I think what keeps you watching is like as soon as you think you have these characters figured out, it switches on you and they show like another layer. But ultimately, it is like a privileged like vacay that you can only think so much of. But there's more to it than that. But yeah, you're right. I loved the teens, and I'm thinking about it now. I'm like, were they teenagers? Like
I think they were
friends?
college, like
college.
early
You're right,
yeah.
college. I love them and like them reading like pretentious books like on their vacay, like fake reading probably, but like I thought they were really interesting to watch.
Yeah, what I think is interesting that they do a pretty good job is you mentioned privilege, right? And I think the privileged remain privileged. And when then you talk about some of the maybe characters who are less privileged, the decisions they make is to remain privilege adjacent, right? So when we think about like the best friend character, the decisions she make is there's multiple times that you expect them to be able to put their foot down and say, hey, I'm fighting against whatever this is. But at the end, the choice you make is it's more comfortable to remain in this circle than it is to fight against it. And you get that in multiple instances, I think, with that character. I think at the end with that relationship where we talk about where life's going to be harder for me. I'm putting myself in Alexandra Daddario's character's shoes. Life's going to be harder for me to go do the things that I think are noble and bold and the things that I actually want to do than it would be if I were to just stay in the orbit of this rich, lavish, privileged lifestyle. And that's what was ultimately disappointing is you can empathize with someone making that decision, right? As an outside perspective, it's easier to say, no, you should have made a different decision. You should have made the bold, better decision. But people are going to choose maybe what's best for them or what's easier. And that's what I think was so hard is, the way that show captured that for sure.
Yeah. I get it though too.
I do too.
Yeah,
right?
I feel like as much as you're rooting for it, you also, I guess they ground the characters so well that you're like, I do see where she's coming from. Like, I don't discredit where she's coming from.
Let's talk Briauna here. I'll let you choose here. King Richard or Squid Game? Which one do you feel more passionately about chatting on?
Yeah, I guess we could talk about Squid Games.
Cool. Squid Game. So Squid Game was the Netflix series that I think took over the world. It was the most streamed series here for a long time and probably still is at the time of the recording. Yeah. So tell me what you liked about it.
Yeah, Squid Games was interesting because it was one of those things, and I'm sure, maybe you guys can relate to this, that I resisted at first because it was so like, it became so popular. All you could see was about Squid Games. So I was kind of like, okay, when I finish whatever show I'm watching, I'll get to it. Like I wasn't feeling super urgent, but I also think it was prefaced to me as like horror and just shocking and everything. And as much as I guess you can look at that, I feel like if you look at it as a whole, there's so much more to it. And I loved Parasite, and it was just a great extension, I feel like, of what they're talking about in Parasite as far as classism goes, that I really enjoyed. And then there's, of course, like even as we were talking about like the Marvel movies, it's just like this connection of humanity. But in Squid Games, it's like there's those things that we relate to just in like the human condition, but in both like the glorified ways where like we all come together, but also in the bad ways where we kind of can put ourselves first and be really selfish and, I don't know, cruel, just in fear and in desperation. And I think between like Parasite and in Squid Games, you empathize even when they are making really awful and like bad choices. You empathize with them because you understand where they're coming from like a financial position, why they would do something terrible.
I think a lot about like the character, Adam Sandler's character in Uncut Gems. I don't know if you guys either saw that, but like, you see these people who are in these like financial woes, and it's a little bit different than that movie, but I think about it in the same way where like you can empathize and say, hey, this person is making these decisions because of the financial hardship that they're under and systemic oppression, et cetera, et cetera. However, at the same time, a lot of the reason that they continue to be in the situation that they're in is because of more and more bad decisions where, especially like in both of those movies and shows, gambling problems, right? Where it's just like constant gambling and making these choices that are, ultimately, of course, trying to think about getting more and being better and having a better situation. But it's also like, because you're gambling, you keep putting yourself in these worse situations. But Squid Game was completely captivating. I agree that it was just like, you see all these various different characters, and I think that ultimately there's no chance for all of them to survive just based off the nature of the show. But there's so many of them that you don't want to see go, and the progression of that show. It's very, Hunger Games adjacent in that, the model of it is, one survivor throughout the entire thing, and there's these various different challenges of getting these characters through. But yeah, I do think that there were some things that I had some qualms with in it, and I'm curious to get your thoughts. One, the only thing that really took me out of the series that I really liked is there were some plot holes, I think, towards the end that I was just like, what was the purpose of that?
The end entirely, or?
Well, no, not the end. I'll get to some of it, but like the Americans that are in the show, I think they were so poorly written, and I don't know if it's because of the culture gap between, the Korean writer and maybe like the way Americans talk, but like that dialogue for Americans was just like,
it did
terrible.
It takes you out of the show.
It did, like so much that I was like, this does not feel authentic, and it feels like they're like, who are the 3 white dudes in Korea that we can just pull into the set for a day to play these characters, right? It was just, there's so many weird aspects with those characters that like pulled me out. Like I was so immersed in the show and got to that moment and I was pulled out. But yeah, I was curious what you thought about that part of it.
I know, I guess thinking about it now, as much as I feel like that isn't maybe someone that we know, I also kind of feel like it is, in like, especially just like in a political climate. I don't know. I can kind of relate to it, but they were just so like obvious about those characters that it does take you out of the show. That everything else was so seamless and you're so invested. It does kind of take you, like, it just kind of takes a different turn. But like the greed and what we can watch and what we can enjoy from a place of privilege, and I'm not saying we, but in a way, just I don't know if it's that far off. I think it's hard to watch, but I don't know if it's that far off.
No. I agree with you. Yeah, absolutely. Those people exist, right? Like that exists in the world of those people who can do such dirty things. I was literally just talking about like the acting and the dialogue of how forced it felt, how inauthentic it was. The fact that I would say one character says one thing, then you would respond, and then you would respond, and then like it just kept doing this like merry-go-round of I'm going to say something, I'm going to say something, now I'm going to say something. Like it was just like, what is this? And then like the jokes and the little things they were saying.
I guess I could see like a cultural disconnect as far as like how that would like casually play out.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure people of other countries probably see that when we write characters for their culture, but yeah, that definitely took me out of it.
One thing too, I guess, did you guys like, I started with the dubbed version and I just can't do it. Like I tried another show like that too. I had to watch the subtitle version because
I always do. I can't stand dubbed.
Yeah. And like that would take you out. So maybe like that part of the show feels dubbed.
It does.
For them. And I guess it literally is dubbed. So there you go. But yeah, I feel like there is a disconnect there as far as it feeling like a natural and genuine. So for sure. But yeah.
Well, anyway, we got to get out of here soon. But before we do, Daniel, what you like about Luca? Give us a little brief rundown there.
I'm a big fan of just Pixar movies in general. There's something about just like these simple coming of age stories that are like really pretty. And I feel like Luca is that. Like that was my biggest takeaway from it, is like it's so nice just to look at. It's a story about a sea monster family, and this little boy from this family realizes that, you know, his family always tells him, it's kind of like a trope, like you're never supposed to go above water, and then he realizes that he can. So it's kind of a coming of age story, but it's just so pretty. Like I felt just kind of in awe, like the whole time I was watching it, like, wow, this is like really amazing. So I think it was a good Pixar movie. It has good animation, a cute little story. So if you're, you know, looking for something to watch, I definitely recommend it.
Awesome. And Brianna, anything else you want to speak on from your list? Maid or King
yes.
Richard?
Actually, yeah.
Whatever
Okay,
you got,
I'll start
whatever you
with
got.
King Richard just because I feel like maybe in this recap, it came out recently. It's an amazing story. If you like tennis, there's like amazing matches in it too. As far as like Venus and Serena Williams, the sisters go, I didn't realize until like, okay, their story's amazing. It's also like that I've told you, Ryan, the Beyonce song in the trailer, it plays at the end. It's powerful. Their story's powerful. They're from Compton. Tennis is a very expensive sport. Sports in general are expensive. And their dad was so focused on them succeeding. The confidence that was instilled in them, I think, is incredible. It's also to be critiqued because I think, you know, they created this or they produced this movie in honor of their dad. And I think, yeah, like some people might say that their dad really drove them, and his priorities in other areas of his life maybe don't reflect like what was idolized in King Richard, but I don't care. I loved it. I thought it was a great movie. It's worth seeing. And as far as like it being like a biopic or like a biography film, they did a great job. Like it's just beautiful. And so yeah, I loved it. And Maid was also really good. You guys should watch it. Ryan and Daniel haven't.
Whoa.
Soundtrack amazing again. I think that has a lot to do with it. It's kind of like what we're all about here as far as like, you know, things moving us. I loved in Maid, it's just, she's super resilient. She's a young woman like myself. Not only that, though, I feel like the characters in it were unique. Yeah, and it depicts like a bipolar parent, which I think like nowadays there's so much content on, there's a lot more shared about people dealing with bipolar. That I feel like there hasn't been like as like when I was growing up and things. So it's just helpful to see. And yeah, it's amazing. It's a great limited series. It's interesting too, because like while we were thinking about this, I'm like, I feel like limited series is like a thing. It's almost like when you don't want a movie to end.
Yeah.
That's what a limited series is like giving us. And I feel like in the most part, like it's for me, I love them because they don't end until you've like binge watched them and it's just enough. So yeah.
What I think is interesting, and I think I've talked to you both about this in some capacity, but I'm enjoying much more a lot of these week to week things more so than I did as a kid. Obviously in the moment when an episode ends, I'm just like, fuck, I want to watch the next episode. Right. But then at the same time, when I get these time to spend time with these characters, for example, you know, if we were thinking about White Lotus, I had to wait week to week for that to come out, right? When that happens, I have time to think about, okay, what did I just watch for one, right? And think about, what did I see? Why did the character do what they do? What is that character going to do next? And when I can let that fester with me for a week, the next episode that comes out, then I can take that one in and have that same relationship with it to think about, okay, cool. Now I get to think about what's going to happen next and think about what that character just did and why did they do that? And maybe what are the writers thinking when they're doing this type of stuff? And then when you look at like relationships, by the end of it, the story that you just sat with, maybe, you know, White Lotus was 6 episodes or whatever it was, you spent six weeks of your life in a situation where you got to see this entire thing. And the things that happen in your life in 6 weeks can be major or minor, but that time, there's a lot of things that happen. When you binge something, it's like you saw an entire relationship start, you know, fester, end all in a single day, right? But when you got to see that whole arc over 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 24 weeks, depending on how long a season can go, you get more time to be like, oh, I sat with them in the early new falling in love phase. And then I saw them, through their troubles. And then I saw them break up. And then I saw them get back together. And like when that happens over the course of a year of your life, like it feels so much more special. So as much as I love miniseries and being able to binge, I'm also loving it so much more this week to week break. And I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I guess I'm like, blame it on my attention span in our 2021 age of social media and everything. But I do find it's more of a commitment when it's from week to week, because you don't get that, like, I don't know, like there's just something about binging a show that like I can't, it's a lifestyle.
Or think about it like the one we watched, which is on my list, Mayor of Easttown, right?
Oh,
like
yeah.
the
Like,
time
you
in
can't
between
wait.
the moment when there's something pivotal that happens with the Evan Peters character. At the end of that episode, you don't know what happens. And then you're waiting a week like, oh my gosh, I want to know what happens.
so right.
It would feel so much less impactful if I was able to just click next episode and see what happened.
That definitely does speak to, though, because I feel like I love consuming. I feel like there's a lot of amazing stuff, like, given our episode to consume. But with consuming so much, you don't really like sit with it like you would normally. You kind of like get through it, and then you're almost like, okay, that was amazing, I loved it. And then it's like, okay, what should we watch tonight or whatever. I'm like, not to sound depressing, but it kind of does feel that way.
All right. Well, thank you guys both for sitting here and chatting with me. I really appreciate y'all. And we'll see y'all next week when we talk about music. Okay. And now we have an awesome opportunity to have a new segment here with Miss Veronica. Ronnie, thanks for joining us today. We're so happy to have you back.
Hi, I'm so excited.
I know it's been a while and you've been busy doing lots of amazing things, both with the Jumpin' Jacob film that I know that we both had the chance to work on, and it had its run in some festivals and things. So tell us what's been going on in Ronnie's life.
Yes. So as you saw, we did get accepted to the San Jose International Short Film Festival, which I had heard of before. And so it was really exciting to go. And my brother and I went up. Our lovely Ryan came up. And it was just really cool to see it play on a big screen and to just also watch insanely good short films for 4 days straight. And we won an award.
We did win an award. It was one of the coolest experiences that I've ever been a part of. I've heard about, film festivals my whole life, and, whether it's Sundance or TIFF or whatever, and this wasn't that, but it was still really cool in its own right. The time that we spent working on that short film, we've been so removed from when we were actually making it that, now at the point that it's in festivals and things like that, like my only experience watching it has been on watching it at the TV at your folks' house, or on my phone or a computer or whatever. But being able to, one, not only see it on a big screen in the movie theater, but hear the audience's reaction was one of the
so
coolest
exciting.
experiences.
There's one part in it that is a little spooky, and hearing everybody gasp at the same time in a theater full of people, I was hitting Alex, like how cool it was. And I told him, I was like, you designed that. Like you designed that feeling that everyone was supposed to feel, and they did. And it was just really, really cool. And I'm happy it was received well.
Was that a moment of pride for him?
Yeah, I looked at him and he was just like grinning, like he was so happy.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
What's so amazing, and I have so much love for your brother, is his reactions are always very muted. So even when he's excited, nervous, all of the above, it's like the same reaction.
Smiles.
Yeah, it's just a smile, and he's just like
nods.
stoic in body language, But yeah, you could just tell he was just full of nervous energy. But then, like when those moments were happening, it was just so exciting to see. I will also add that what was also funny, you mentioned he designed that scene, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but there's a scene where there's something spooky that happens, and it involves a character. Well, Alex in that one shot had to play that character, right? So he put on the pants. So even in that moment, as much as he designed the scene, as much as all of it was him, it came from his brain. He also is the one on camera in that moment.
Yeah.
No one knows that it's him, but
right.
like that's what I also think is funny that was the case. But yeah, there were so many moments that, even just the compliments that people were coming to talk to you guys about afterwards was just so sweet, because I think it's rare that and I tried to convey this to both of you while we were there, was a lot of the reaction when I first showed up. I showed up a couple of days later after you guys had already been there watching a bunch of films. There was a lot of imposter syndrome types of feelings and responses that I was getting from you guys. Like, these guys are all so amazing. You didn't explicitly say that, like, what are we doing here? But, you know, it's kind of like, what are we doing here? You know, and all this talent. And the fact that not only after we were watching some of our peers doing some of the same stuff out there, you know, I had to remind you guys, like, you are here because you're belonging and you deserve to be there. And so, yes, there is a lot of amazing art that we watch where I was also blown away. But we fit along with that. We were selected to be a part of that too, because of the great work that all the people that we had involved put in too. So I think it was a good reminder that all the people that were coming up to you after to compliment, and the fact that you won an award for the best showing of our segment, it just goes to prove that be proud of what we did. And,
I know. It was really nice to have you remind us of that, because that's all we just kept saying to each other the whole weekend was like, did you see the production on that? Like, they had, what was their budget? Like, they had to shut down a street for that, like all of this stuff. And we're like, we shot at our parents' house and we were really stressed out. And so it was just nice to take a second and be like, no, this is exciting. And we're here for a reason, and to not like negate it with like, yeah, but ours is, you know, this and that's that. It's just, no, it was just, we were really proud. It was really exciting.
So this is On Brand. We are doing our TV and film episode here today, talking about our favorite film projects, whether it's television series or movies from throughout the year. So Veronica, tell us, what were your 5 TV film adjacent projects of 2021?
So my top 5, which was very hard to narrow down for me, are The Sex Lives of College Girls, In the Heights, The White Lotus, and I don't know if this is a cheat, but And Just Like That, which is the Sex and the City show that's coming up that hasn't come out yet, but it comes out this week, and the other 2.
Yeah. So for some background, I think this is a cool story for the audience. When we first started the show, we did a little bit of a test episode with Veronica, and Veronica was like our first guest, you know, of sorts that was never released. That footage will never hear the light of day, just because we were all just kind of earning our stripes and figuring this out. But in that episode, we learned on Ronnie's Pop 5 was Sex and the City. And so over that time period, I've known and learned more and more just how important that show was for you. And so the second I saw that the trailer came out, I texted her right away, like, how stoked are you? How stoked are you? So even if it's not a full season of television or a full movie that's out just yet, that trailer alone, I know was super impactful for you. So when does that air, and how stoked are you?
It airs on December 9th. And I'm very excited because, I mean, there's a lot of, I think, not criticism, but a lot of like skepticism from people of, you know, they're bringing it back and why, and Kim Cattrall's not going to do it. And just, you know, what usually happens when people want to critique a show. I'm excited because it's just fun. And they have, from what I've seen and things that have leaked, there's all these storylines that fans of the show will enjoy, sneaks of other characters that have come back, or things that they're talking about that we remember. And then they also have new characters that they're bringing in. A big thing for Sex and the City was they had 0 diversity on their show. And now they're going to have diversity, which is great. Like they just had really 2-dimensional characters if they were, you know, Black or Hispanic or other women. And so now they have main characters coming in that are more diverse. So I think that's really exciting, because that was a huge like issue that a lot of people had with Sex and the City.
A little bit of an editor's note here. Veronica mentioned this. This is airing December 9th. The episode that you are listening to right now, audience, is being recorded before December 9th, but And Just Like That will have likely already aired the first episode by the time this is out. So just a quick note there.
I know, it's crazy because there's another trailer that came out yesterday or the day before yesterday, and Sarah Jessica Parker says something about Instagram. And that, I mean, the original show was so 90s. It was like you never thought you would hear any of them talking about any of that stuff. So my initial reaction was like, ugh, because I love the show so much. But then it was exciting because then it's like she's doing a podcast in the show instead of her column. Like she hosts a podcast. And so it is updated. So it was just kind of trippy to see them talking about like really modern,
Yeah.
contemporary things aside from all the 90s stuff.
You know, talking about some of the stuff that was specific to the stuff you selected today, you mentioned how difficult it was to narrow this stuff down. Before we started recording today, we had a little conversation off air about how, in general, the music stuff came to me and Daniel relatively quickly. Maybe not the film and TV stuff. I will say, even for me, I had such a hard time because we grouped it together both with television series and film and like actual, you know, full length pictures and movies. It was tough for me because I thought my list ended up being fully television series. You know, it's new seasons of shows from this past year. And like there were so many movies that I maybe wanted to put in, or, you know, like on Daniel's Inside Bo Burnham, like I thought I wanted to put that on mine, but like TV really came strong, I think, over this past year. And so there was so much really great stuff. And I know one that we both loved, you said it barely missed the cut, was Love Life Season 2. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about it. Love Life Season 2. Love Life Season 1 came out right at the heart of the pandemic. Starred Anna Kendrick, and the show is a bit of an anthology series where it follows a bit of a different character arc over the course of the next 2 seasons. In that show as well, I think that the premise kind of just shows you the arc of relationships and the various different types of partners that you may or may not have, your various loves in your life. I think the pilot of the show has a narration that kind of indicates the average person will have 7 people that they fall in love with over the course of their life, you know, and you follow Anna Kendrick's character and the people that come in and out of her life. And season 2 follows a similar situation with a new character, Chidi from The Good Place, William Jackson Harper. There we go. Good stuff, Ronnie. No, and we follow William Jackson Harper's character in a little bit of a different spin. So tell me, did you like season 1 of Love Life, and now with season 2, I know you did enjoy that. Tell me your thoughts on Love Life.
Yeah, I did really like season 1 of Love Life. It was such a digestible show. Like, it goes so quickly, but it's so fun. And I loved Love Life because of the supporting characters. Her friends in season 1, I thought were so much fun to watch. And I felt very similarly with season 2. I love the 2 characters that play as best friends, Yogi and
he also is
the other
in
one.
Succession.
He's in Succession. Yeah. So I love that. I also just, season 2, I don't know, like it hit me in a different way than season 1 did. I maybe liked it a little bit more, maybe because of the whole season was his internal conflict with like, if he's a good person in these relationships and finding himself. And I feel like that's a little bit different than season 1. Season 1, Anna Kendrick she's also going through that conflict, but she's more like navigating different partners and figuring out what she likes and who she is. And this one, I feel like it's him trying to find himself and be a good person and be a good partner and kind of get over himself in a lot of ways. So I thought that was really interesting to watch.
Yeah, what I found interesting is, you know, and I've been sharing this show a lot with when people are asking, hey Ryan, what's something I should watch next? Because maybe this might just be something I watched relatively recently. This has been the one thing that I've been recommending. And whether it's family or friends, you know, that have been talking to me about the show, I think what has been consensus, at least amongst them, is Darby is Anna Kendrick's character in season 1. Darby is a much more just likable, easy, digestible character. And Marcus, which is William Jackson Harper's character in season 2, comes in and he's immediately, I think, unlikable.
Yeah.
Right? The season starts with him basically being unfaithful in a marriage. His response, I think, to how he's treating his partner and how he deals with conflict, I think is unlikable. And most of what people have kind of been telling me is that like it was harder to at least get started in season 2 because you don't really like Marcus very much. Did you have that feeling, or did you like him from the onset?
I didn't dislike him. He wasn't the most likable because of his choices or how he went about things or how he argued with people or whatever. But I didn't dislike him, maybe because that's just my brain being like, this is my hero. This is my main character. And here we are. So, but I think what made him more likable to me was that they had no problem calling him out on a lot with the writing. So like if he felt too arrogant or combative or whatever it was, like either his sister or his friends were kind of the first ones to shut it down.
Yeah.
And I think that made it easier to watch. Like you enjoy seeing that when you yourself are conflicted on if you like a character or not. But then you see him just settle into himself towards the end of the season, especially when Becca Evans, when he's going through that like pregnancy scare and ups and downs and all of that stuff, you see him kind of settle into I think accepting himself and being okay, and especially in the episode where they go out of town and camp, like that's a huge.
Yeah, there was a couple of things I really wanted to touch on with this season. They do a really good job. And I don't know that I have strong opinions either way, similarly about Marcus's character, especially at the onset. I don't remember disliking him or liking him strongly. I remember there were certain moments that I'm like, that wasn't handled very well. But I think throughout the course of season 2, I think they did such a great job from a writing perspective and in capturing different elements that are more real. I think about a couple of moments where he is, I think, expressing himself. And I think Marcus's character throughout can be very logical and understands what the right thing to do is in almost every single moment. And intention is generally sound. What I think they do a good job of is explaining the struggle of, yes, I know logically there's reasons why the other people made the decisions in my life that affected me either positively or negatively. But I then also want to be able to have the excuse to say, I just want to be mad. I'm mad and I just want to be mad. Let me be mad, right? And let me have the emotions that I want to have. Yes, logically, I can understand why, but I also just want to be able to feel something. He has these little outbursts of emotion where you're just like, yeah, maybe that wasn't handled well when you're thinking about how the other person may be receiving it. But sometimes people just want to be able to, I want to feel and I want to be able to be mad, even if I know I put myself in this situation or whatever the case is. You're right. The side characters do a great job of keeping him in check, but I also think they do a good job of capturing what happens with all of us is sometimes we don't act logically because of the way emotions play into that.
Yeah. And I think he also just had a lot of insecurity that he was sorting through from first episode to last episode. And I think you saw it especially, you definitely saw it with Mia and that whole saga, but I think you really saw it also with the Becca Evans character when, she wanted to have the baby and he was like, is this like your street cred card that, you're going to have like a mixed race baby? Like he kind of like really went and like spewed out, I think, a lot of insecurity he had. And that couldn't be farther from the truth, especially when you saw her daughter from her previous marriage, who was a mixed race actress, and you see him see her daughter and like put it together and feel better. And then and I like that they didn't acknowledge it at all. He just like, I think it was a reality check for him. So I think he was dealing with a lot of insecurity that was sorting itself out towards the end. The only thing I was bummed about though, is that they didn't have an episode on Emily. I was expecting the second episode to be an Emily episode. Yeah. Just about the wife.
Yeah. What I also think is interesting that they did, I think there's a couple times throughout the show, and I'm interested to get your take here, where there's that old saying that like when you feel guilt, right, maybe whether it's not you personally, but you in the sense of like when you're watching characters who are making decisions, when you are riddled with guilt and you have something that you feel like you need to get off of your chest, and it happens a couple of times in this show, do you tell the person because you want to get rid of that guilt? Or are you telling them because it's the right thing to do and because they should then know, right? So are you saying this thing that you're saying for you, or are you saying it for them? And it's something that's always been one of my favorite things to like think about. Like when people come at me with conflict, like, are you saying this because it's actually beneficial for the person you're saying this to? Or are you saying it just because you want to be guilt free? And there's two pivotal moments, I think. It happens multiple times, I think, in this season, but there's two pivotal moments for me where I think the characters make the wrong choice. I'm curious what your thoughts were in terms of that sentiment in general.
With the Kian character telling him, part of me thinks that it just kind of came out like he couldn't act normal anymore without saying something, and it was not, the right time. But that one I feel like was more just, I can't act normal around him this weekend when I'm like calling her and texting her and we're supposed to be having this guy weekend. So that I think is that. With Mia, I think she didn't tell him because she didn't. When you don't want to tell him, once you say that, it's in the air and everything changes. And a lot of people, they like to like really walk up to that line and then like not cross it, flirt with it a little bit. And if she says it right away, that changes everything. If I were to think about her logic, I think this had nothing to do with Marcus. If I don't want our relationship to end, that's what I think her logic was like, it's something I'm trying to work out. I'm not going to rock the boat because it's only going to like hurt him when I don't want us to break up.
But then they do.
But then she does.
Yeah. So yeah, it's crazy because I don't know that there's ever a right answer, but I always think it's fascinating. I don't want to spend too much more time on this because I know there's other things we've got to get to, but I loved the show. It's why it's on this list, right? But yeah, let's talk. Another one that I had here on mine that I just wanted to get your final thoughts on. I know we already did an episode on this in some fashion, so I don't want to spend too much time, but Mayor of Easttown. I know when we recorded this, there were only a few episodes out. I was surprised that it didn't hit your list here because I know how much you loved it. But any thoughts on Mayor?
I thought it was a great show.
Thought it was a great show. Yeah.
I loved it. I loved Evan Peters' character. I think he was nominated for an Emmy for that role after we recorded that last episode. Yeah, I mean, the thoughts that I had then are still the same, where it's like, I just love her and how complicated she is as a character and how similarly sometimes unlikable.
Yeah.
And just trying to figure it out. So yeah, and then Jean Smart.
Yeah.
The mom
character.
Tax.
I don't remember her name.
Yeah. I just, everything about it.
It was great.
It was great. I love the crime.
Yeah.
I love the true crime.
I thought it was so great. I think I've been loving the week to week more.
Yeah.
That experience I think I've appreciated so much more than I think I like being able to binge something. I think selfishly in the moment, I would of course just be like, I want to know what happens next. Like, let me binge this. But the time you get to spend with characters and that like suspense and the thoughts and the theorizing you can do from week to week, I think just makes it so much more enjoyable. And that's what happened with me with this Love Life season. Is just they didn't do week to week, but they did like batches of 3.
Yeah, HBO, they're doing that format because Sex Lives of College Girls is also on HBO, and they do 3 episodes every week. So I think they're trying to find like a happy medium of like, you can binge it, but then you also have to wait. And
yeah. Well, let's talk about that show, Sex Lives of College Girls.
So good.
Mindy Kaling's show, right? Tell us about it. I haven't started it yet, but why is it here? Why is it here on your top? And what do you love about it?
When I first saw the trailer, I was very excited because a lot of times girls, especially on TV, they're in high school, and like you just watch a lot of shows about girls in high school, and this one is girls in college doing fun college things, like trying to hook up with people, like trying to figure themselves out, trying to party, trying to do all of that. And I read something that Mindy Kaling said where she's like, when I was growing up, there were all these buddy frat guy college movies that they were all about guys. And she's like, girls have these same experiences in college. And like, there's just never any like fun show or fun movie about it.
Yeah.
So that's why I really liked, because it's true. Like, I remember being in college and like living in the dorms and going out and just like trying to do my best and trying to have fun. And so that's why I was drawn to the show initially. And then the actors are just so good. They're so funny. And I think one of them, they're all, I mean, relatively, quote unquote unknown as far as like mainstream actors, but one of them, she's a really talented Broadway actress. Another one, I think she had done small roles. I forget the actress's name, but she plays Bella in the show. And I think she's maybe a representation of a lot of Mindy Kaling because she wants to be a comedy writer. She comes from like a traditional Indian family. Yeah. And she has to tell her parents she wants to be a comedy writer. And so those things I think were inspired by Mindy's real life, but Timothy Chalamet's sister is also in it. Wow. Who I didn't know. I was like, this girl, she's so good. Where did they find her? And then I looked her up and I was like, oh, okay.
Nepotism.
But her character is really great. And yeah, it's such a fun show. And then they also deal with some, serious stuff, some serious topics about like finding yourself and identity struggles and, college party or hangout, like maybe like sexual harassment struggles, that happen in college. So they do touch on stuff like that, but it's just really cool to see these girls be like unapologetic and like, we're going out and like, I want to hook up with people and I'm failing all my classes and like just those stuff that you see in buddy comedies. Yeah. But now it's girl.
Dang, you're selling me. I'm going to go watch this.
So good.
Honestly, I had some intrigue. I just hadn't gotten around to it yet.
There's like 8 episodes out right now.
Nice.
So you got some good stuff.
Here we go. Right after we finish recording here. Binging it all. No. Awesome. Cool. Well, I wanted to also ask about the other 2. I think that was another interesting one here. that I wasn't aware of. Tell me a bit about the other two and what you love about that one.
So the other two originally started on Comedy Central. Maybe, I think it aired either right before COVID or it was definitely, or like a year ago. It was definitely, it's been a minute. But that came out on Comedy Central. And I first thought I heard about it because I think it's Chris Kelly. Yeah, Chris Kelly and Sarah Schneider are the creators and the writers. And Chris Kelly was a writer for SNL. And he also wrote the Other People, this movie with Molly Shannon and Jesse Plemons, based on his kind of real experiences in life. So I've heard of him. And then I started following him. And then when he was promoting the other two, it was based in Molly Shannon's, and it was basically started out as these two older siblings that don't have their shit together at all. Like one of them is a struggling actor in New York and serving and waiting tables. And the other one is the girl, she's a flight attendant and she's just kind of a mess and a party girl. And she just doesn't really have an apartment. And then they have a younger brother who's like 13 who ends up blowing up like a Justin Bieber kind of. Shoot. And his name is Chase, and his name is Chase Dreams in the show. And Molly Shannon plays the mom. So he blows up and gets all this fame. And so then they focus on the other two, like the other older siblings that are like, what is happening? And like, and so it was just so funny and so well written. And they played into a lot of like the absurdity of that world of when someone blows up and everyone's obsessed with him, and he's going to like red carpets for like kids movies. And, you know, they do a shot where he's talking to someone on the red carpet, Chase Dreams is, and they're like, perfect, we're with Cheez-Its. So can you really like try to incorporate how much you love Cheez-Its into this conversation? So like they make fun of a lot of that stuff. And then it just kind of like went away. And I was like, that show is really good.
Yeah.
And then I saw it pop up on HBO. So I think it moved to HBO.
Wow.
So now season 2 is out on HBO. So I devoured season 2. And it's so funny. The writing is so smart, and like the specificity of the stuff that they make fun of in that show. It's perfect. It's really good.
Dang.
Yeah. Highly recommend.
You're good at selling stuff.
It's so good. It's so funny. And
can you incorporate my pop 5 into your recommendations?
It's like, honestly, like it will. It's a my pop 5.
No, that's awesome. I really love that. And it's HBO. I've said it so much that like when people again ask me for recommendations for things, I'm like, with HBO, they almost never miss. I'm
looking at my list and like, yeah, 4 of them are on HBO, and I just now realized that.
Yeah, and then the one that you said almost missed it was the
Love Life.
Love Life, which is also on HBO. So yeah, I mean, they put out just such incredible content. Let's talk about the last one here. That's also on HBO, White Lotus. We talked about it briefly with Brianna, but I'm curious about your thoughts on White Lotus. What did you love about it?
I just loved that you couldn't tell if it was a comedy, if it was a drama, if it was a satire, if it was, so that tone I really liked. I mean, Jennifer Coolidge was perfect. I think she's the only, because they're doing a second season and it's going to be an anthology. So it's going to be at a whole new resort, I think in Italy or maybe Greece. I don't know. But she's the only character that they're bringing back for season 2 because she was just so good. And in that show, like, I mean, aside from Jennifer Coolidge, like Alexandra Daddario does so good in that show. Like her acting in that show I thought was amazing. And I hated her husband. And he always plays, not always, but he plays kind of like characters, not that bad, but.
Excuse me. Immediately what I remembered him from was he's in like the last few seasons of The Office, or the last season of The Office. He plays the like, you know how they bring in the characters that are basically, one looks almost identical to Jim and the other one is like identical to Dwight. He plays the Jim adjacent one that ends up like being with Aaron towards the end of it. But so all I could see him, like I have seen him be in that like shitty type of character in other things, but like I kept bringing back to him like, where'd that guy go from The Office? He was such a sweetie. But
I kept thinking of him in Girls.
Oh yeah. He's terrible in Girls too, I think. Yeah.
He just has that. He's
HBO.
so good. He has that vibe.
HBO again. Yeah. Awesome. Well, last thing here for you, Ronnie, actually is In the Heights. Talk to me about that one.
Yeah, that one I put on my list just because I was so excited for it to come out. I saw that play on Broadway with the original cast when I was in high school. As a movie, I thought the movie was really fun and, you know, all of those things. But it's more like it just reminded me of how much I loved the play. So I was so, I went to the movie opening night and, you know, cinematically, all of these things, like it has its critiques or whatever. But it was just a special thing for me to watch because I remember being in Miami in theater and we all went to New York for a theater trip. And we went to In the Heights, and maybe I just don't remember, but for the most part, none of us really knew what it was going to be. Like our drama teacher, you know, set it up and we went. And just like being a theater group from Miami and going up and seeing In the Heights, and like all the people that are in that show are like, it's like the guy that sells like the ice cream and the card, and it's like all like very diverse and Hispanic, and like people are speaking Spanglish, and like that's what it was in Miami. And like, those are the people that we knew. So it was just really cool to see on a Broadway play. So we were all obsessed with it, like after we saw it. And maybe because we all had like personal relationships to it of, you know, just a lot of familiarity there. So when the movie came out, I was very, very excited about it. And it was just, it was fun. And
yeah, well, thanks so much for coming again and chatting about all this stuff. I love it. Just a brief rundown for my stuff again before we go, because I know I didn't spend too much time talking about the things I loved with either Briauna or Ronnie here. But Ted Lasso season 2 is phenomenal. Check that out. Succession, also another HBO show. It's a phenomenal show about, similarly almost in White Lotus in the sense of like these caricatures of these rich media moguls of sorts. But that one is also incredibly well written, still airing right now. So season 3 of Succession is still ongoing. Check that one out if you haven't. Love Life season 2, which we talked about. Mayor of Easttown, which we have an episode from earlier in the year where we talked about it in detail. And lastly, Sex Education, the Netflix show.
Ooh, I've heard very interesting, like good things about that, but I haven't seen it.
It's so good. Yesterday, I don't remember if this was on air or off air, and I'll cut around this, but we were talking a bit about like Big Mouth, the animated show, and how that's like talking about like, again, high school age or like puberty and the topic of sex and what peers are talking about in terms of sex when you're younger and you're growing up. And I think Big Mouth just is very vulgar with it and has its own way of approaching it. But I think Sex Education does an incredible job of approaching it from a sense that shows realistically how people view it as youth, but actually does it in a real adult way, because the main character's mom is just a sex therapist. So he grows up with just like these really, you know, studied views on sex and how people handle it. And it's so well written. There's so many amazing things that they do in that show, and I'm such a big fan of it.
I'll check it out. You sold me.
Let's do it. All right. Daniel, any final thoughts before we end this episode?
So much information.
I know. You mentioned that there was with Sex in the City, because like at the time of us recording this, it hadn't come out yet. That's how I was like about the new Spider-Man movie that's coming out, and I'm like, I know I'm gonna love it, but I don't want to put it on the list. But I know that that's like gonna be the best thing I've watched all year, even if it sucks. So
Is it Tom Holland still as Spider-Man?
there's rumors that all of the other past Spider-Man are gonna come and
I heard that rumor.
Part of the multiverse theory. So we'll see if that's true or not. For the record, I'm a skeptic, and I think that there will be no Toby or Andrew. So we'll see how that plays out.
Awesome.
What are your thoughts on it, Ryan? Do you think Toby and Andrew will be in it?
So I don't know is the short version. I don't think anyone does, right? But I've gotten myself so hopeful because of the internet discourse that like I'm generally the person who will say like, just go in and accept everything for what it is. Try not to go in with huge expectations.
Me too.
Because then that's how you leave yourself disappointed, right? If you just let the people tell the story and take in the story instead of trying to create what you want the story to be, you're always going to leave disappointed because it's never going to be exactly what you want it to be. But I've bought into a lot of the hype on this stuff, and I'm like, but it would be so sick if they came back. So I'm trying to pull myself back to say like it's going to be great either way. But I want them to be in it. So like that's what's hard.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
And I feel the the same way. I've been super hyped about it. I think originally before COVID, it was supposed to come out in like the summer of this year. So only a couple weeks away.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. We'll see you next week when we talk about music. But let's head out with the theme from Ted Lasso. Because why not?
Second, take your time. You know I'm yours if you remember that you're mine.
No, I'm not challenging you. I'm just saying, how can you fucking talk shit about something that you saw? You admitted, you opened this conversation to say, I didn't really watch it. I was not really paying attention.
No, it's
and I didn't enjoy it, and I only saw 2 episodes. So, but I didn't actually watch those 2 episodes. So.
no, it's not that.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to write a report, Brianna, next week that says, let me tell you all about Maid. You know, I wasn't really watching it.
Don't take
The
this out
characters
on Maid.
sucked. I do because
And like Ted Lasso wishes. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's not that. It's just watching it. There's a certain sense of humor in a lot of popular shows. Big Bang Theory. Perhaps.
Okay.
How I Met Your Mother. That I can't relate to, that I don't like, that I don't respond to, or like I don't think is like
I don't necessarily
so funny.
think it's that kind of.
Yeah, Big
Okay,
Bang Theory.
sorry,
know if-
were
I don't
those
know if
extreme examples? But no, I just think there was certain jokes like from Ted specifically that I'm like, I don't know, I couldn't get. It was taking me out of the show from what that wasn't in. You have to say it wasn't in season 1.
Yes, it was. If you go back and watch season 1,
They
it's
were
there.
better.
So let me
I
tell you.
don't know. I genuinely enjoyed season 1, and season 2, I really was like, okay, but
Let me tell you, okay? First episode was terrible, okay? Of season 2. I'm being strong. It wasn't terrible, but I'm trying to gain points here by sympathizing and agreeing with you here, okay? No, I agree with you. The way the season 2 starts doesn't get there. But there's some of the most like emotional moments and some of the best episodes of television, period, that I've ever seen in this show. So like when we get to, I think it's episode 6, there's so many moments that I just, because I know your sensibilities, I'm like, fucking Brianna.
I know. I
would
guess I
love
need to
this so
watch
much.
it, but like cut the crap. No.
It's a comedy show about an American
know.
guy who coaches a soccer team in Europe, and it's Jason Sudeikis from Saturday Night Live. So there's of course going to be some of that, but
Yeah.
and I can get it. Like there are sometimes that like there are just certain things, and we were talking about it before we started recording about certain aspects of comedy and humor that are just like, I don't get it. I don't really like it. It rubs me the wrong way. Why would I keep subjecting myself to that? So I get it, and ultimately we can have.
I
differing
also
opinions.
love like Everybody Loves Raymond. Like I also like I don't know. So but now that we're talking about it, like I do need to watch it. So I didn't finish it. It's not a fair shot. I'm just saying from what I did see, I don't know. I was like I just was a little put off by it.
That's fair.
I think that can happen too if you're like watching something passively. Like you might have like a
Ray
whole,
Romano. No, I'm just kidding.
but you might have a whole different perception of it, of being like, you may go back and like, if you're actually like paying attention and giving it a chance, like it could come off like totally differently, you know?
Oh, what I've learned too, and it's both with music and movies and anything, whether it's something that Brianna recommends to me or anyone recommends to me, or if it's something that like I've been wanting to try, if I'm not in the right headspace for exactly what it is when I'm watching it, it's over. I can't do it, right?
So
like
true.
Yeah.
we have a couple music things that are coming up next week that we're going to be talking about that, you know, the first time I was exposed to some of these things, I was just like, I didn't really like it. I didn't. And then when I heard it again, when I was in a better headspace, I was like, oh my gosh, I get this now. And I feel it so much more. We talked about it on the Taylor episode with Devin too, right? With the timing in which he kind of experienced both of those records, for example, meant something as to how you would potentially internalize either what's happening lyrically or what's happening with the subject matter, right? I think about this all the time with TV as well. If it's something that I need to be invested in and watching the subtitles, because I put subtitles on everything, even in English, you know,
That's a
like
good brain exercise.
yeah, if I'm just not, I don't want to be focused and I want something that's going to be on in the background so I could text or be on social media or send an email or do whatever at the same time, then of course I'm not going to be able to internalize it the way I think I would. So if you're not in the right headspace for something, and not that I think there's like a golden headspace that you need to have for Ted Lasso, but you know, if you're not in a goofy mood, or you're wanting something that feels more earnest or feels more, you know, relatable or romance, or you want action, and that's just not what you're getting at that moment, you can't force some of this stuff too. So I also think sometimes we do ourselves a disservice, knowingly or unknowingly, when we go and give something a try that we just might not have been ready for us at that moment because we were in a bad mood, or we were in a good mood, or we were in, you know, any types of different headspace that would really impact how we receive what's coming at us.
I like that perspective too.
I have a friend who always gets angry at me because she'll like try and show me something. Like she'll be like, "Oh, I think you would really like this band," and then I just will be like, "Yeah,"
and you
cool.
don't.
And then, but then, like, you know.
What kind of games are you playing, Daniel?
No. But what's a funny story is like it happened with the band Brand New. Like she'd been a big fan of Brand New for years, and then we did that episode with Devin, and so I actually listened to Brand New, and now I'm like a huge fan of Brand New. Listen to their music all the time, and she was like, "Are you kidding me? Like I'm always trying to put you onto stuff."
And see, what the story here is, Brianna, is Daniel doesn't respect women. And the second he heard it from
you don't need to tell me that.
A Grammy-nominated record producer, that's when he decided he was...
I was like, wait a second. This might be something serious.
No,
it's
the real
tough,
kicker...
though. Like when people... Well, Ryan, you relate to this with Ted Lasso because you recommended it so hard and you believed in it. And if people weren't listening, you're like... It's hard not to take offense to it, but also you should just let people come to it in their own time because sometimes we do resist. But this, Daniel, this sounds like a different situation.
No,
the kicker was he came up to her, you're like, "Yo, you got to check out this band I heard, Brand New."
Oh,
and then she was like, "What the fuck are you talking?" No.
I always do make that joke with her too. I'm
got
just
an
like,
F1
Brand
in the
New,
building.
ever
No.
heard of them?
Anyway, guys, we will just stop recording.